On my wedding night, I planned to sleep with the head of the Whites. His legs were paralyzed, he couldn't fight back. He just glared at me, eyes bloodshot, like he wanted to kill me. I just smiled at him. "Eric," I said, "I'm just borrowing you to get pregnant. Once I am, I'll leave you alone." But after more than 3 years of marriage, I still wasn't pregnant. Until the day I threw his vasectomy report in his face. "Eric, care to explain?" Eric was clearly flustered. He grabbed my hand, looking lost, his voice almost pleading. "Sandy, don't be mad. If we had a kid, you'd leave me." Eric, eldest son of the Whites, head of the Vast Horizons group. In a normal world, a golden boy like him would never have anything to do with an illegitimate daughter from a third-rate family like me. But fate had other plans. In his second year running Vast Horizons, Eric had a car accident. He survived, but he was paralyzed. When my father mentioned it, I just listened to it as gossip. I never dreamed I'd become the star of that particular drama. A bride to change his luck? When those words came out, the looks on the Smiths' faces were even more priceless than the day Simon brought me into their home. Couldn't blame them. This piece of gossip was a real shocker. The Whites' crippled eldest son was looking for some unlucky woman to marry to change his fortune. Made sense. Even if his legs were shot, other parts might still be operational. I was hiding in the corner, soaking up the drama, when the Whites' top flunky suddenly looked at me. His beady eyes crinkled into slits, like a weasel eyeing a chicken flapping helplessly in a pot. A bad feeling washed over me. "Our madam has her heart set on the younger Sandy." No, it couldn't be me, right? I kept backing away, waving my hands frantically. "Don't look at me. I'm not the official one. The real younger Sandy is over there." The flunky followed my gesture and saw 7-year-old Lily Shaw in her princess dress, looking at him innocently. I clearly saw his eye twitch, but he quickly went back to his weaselly expression. "That's right. It's Sandy, the younger daughter." My heart sank. I made one last, desperate attempt. "Is it too late to say I'm not Sandy?" Obviously, it was too late. Proposal, marriage license, wedding, all in 3 short days. In the blink of an eye, I was sitting on the marital bed. Even weirder, I still hadn't met my crippled husband. I figured I should go find him. It would be awkward not to recognize my own husband later on. The moment I flipped on the light, there was a menacing, life-sized bust standing in the doorway, pale face, furrowed brow, murderous glare. Looked like he wanted to kill someone. Shut up. Oh, it was alive. But he really didn't look like any kind of good luck charm. This had to be my crippled husband. The head of the Whites, no, the former head, Eric. His brow was tightly furrowed, radiating hostility, practically screaming, "Stay away." But I was married to him. How could I be a stranger? I plopped down confidently on the sofa, yanked the thick blanket off his wheelchair, and poked his leg with a finger. He seemed stunned by my move. The deep lines in his forehead vanished, leaving only wide, startled eyes. He actually looked a little cute. "Eric?" I tried his name tentatively. The furrows reappeared on his brow. I quickly corrected myself. Eric. That was the right code word. His surprisingly delicate brow finally relaxed again. I took a deep breath and told myself, we're still in the negotiation phase. A little thing like a name, a big girl like me wouldn't sweat it. I cleared my throat, placed my hand on his leg, and spoke softly. "Eric, your legs. They're not really paralyzed, are they? Is this like in those novels, where you're just biding your time, playing weak, waiting for everyone to underestimate you, ignore you, insult you, and then, bim, you stand up and blow everyone's mind?" While he was distracted, I gave his leg a hard pinch. No reaction. Dead silence. Even scarier than the dead silence was the look on Eric's face. I could practically see the veins throbbing on his forehead. "Get out." Of course, I wasn't going to get out, but I couldn't hide my disappointment. This guy was really crippled. However, that just meant there was even less to be afraid of. I pulled my hand back, now at eye level with Eric, and tried to talk to him. My name is Sandy. I'm the illegitimate daughter of the Smiths. You probably don't know them, but that's not important. All you need to know is that the Whites could crush the Smiths with a flick of their wrist. So, whether you like it or not, whether I like it or not, we're married. Maybe it was my imagination, but after I said that, Eric's ferocious expression seemed to soften a bit. I originally thought if you had your own revenge plan, I wouldn't have to worry. I'd just wait for you to make your comeback, then divorce you and make a graceful exit. But now it seems you really are paralyzed. So you can't blame me for looking out for myself. Eric suddenly became wary. What are you planning to do? I enunciated clearly. I want a child. My words were shocking enough to make Eric forget to even frown. Impossible. He rejected me immediately. You just behave and be Eric's wife. Even if I can't walk, I won't shortchange you on money. But I will never touch you. Unless you want to die. He was blatantly threatening me. Too bad for him, I wasn't scared at all. That's not up to you. I stood up and walked towards him. My able body towered over him by half a head. He was clearly flustered, his tone no longer as confident as before. What are you doing? I didn't say anything, just scooped him up in my arms. Perhaps not expecting me to be so strong, Eric's panic was obvious. Sandy, don't do anything crazy. I tossed him onto the bed, shed the wedding dress that had been constraining me all day, straddled him, and started unbuttoning his clothes. I'm 6 years younger than you, good-looking, slim, work out every day. Sleeping with me, you're not. Losing out. A ripped 8-pack appeared before me. For a second, I felt a little sheepish. Seemed like I was the one getting the better deal. Eric, forcibly stripped, his eyes suddenly bloodshot as if he'd suffered a great humiliation, glared at me and spat out a threat. Sandy, you're asking for it. I just smiled at him. Eric, relax. I'm just borrowing you to get pregnant. Once I am, I'll leave you alone. Don't be scared. I'll be gentle. Eric was trembling with rage, the corners of his eyes red. Seeing him so furious, I burst out laughing. All right, I'll stop teasing you. I buttoned up his shirt, reluctantly glancing one last time at those abs. That's what you get for being so mean to me earlier. This is my revenge. Eric seemed a bit dazed by my sudden change of tune and didn't speak for a long moment. I was exhausted from the day, had no energy to deal with him, so I lay down beside him and conked out. In my daze, I thought I heard Eric muttering through gritted teeth. I'm going to kill you. For days into the marriage, I was still alive and kicking. Ever since that day, Eric had treated me like I was invisible. He ignored me, refused to communicate. The only time he reacted was if I touched him, and then his eyes were 100% wary. I found his reactions amusing, sometimes even deliberately provoking him. This mansion was huge and empty, just the two of us. The housekeeper would leave as soon as she finished cooking, silent as a castle ghost. I was so bored I was going stir-crazy, so I started messing with Eric. When Mr. Harry, the White's top flunky, arrived, I was in the garden doing an aerobics routine with Eric. I was holding his hands, making him follow the moves in the video. He couldn't resist, so he just played the part of a beautiful, lifeless marionette. Harry was so shocked his voice cracked, his weaselly, squinty eyes popping wide. Mr. Eric. He snatched Eric away from me, his voice trembling. Mr. Eric is a patient. How can you treat him like this? He was genuinely panicked, even forgot his usual polite forms of address. Before I could say anything, Eric couldn't wait. His patience with me these past few days had reached its limit, and he finally found an outlet. Arrange the divorce. Now. The words were practically squeezed from between his teeth. I suspected what he really wanted to say was, arrange for someone to kill me. Harry paused, looking troubled. Mr. Eric, the marriage was arranged by Madam. Eric fell silent. I sat on the stone table in the garden, swinging my legs, and burst out laughing. I nudged Eric with my foot. Hey, so you don't call the shots after all, huh? What's with the big act in front of me? You're no different from me. Eric's fists clenched sharply, veins popping. Harry quickly jumped in to smooth things over. Oh, my dear young Eric's wife, please, say a little less. Mr. Eric, it's time for your checkup at the hospital today. Eric's face turned pale with anger. Not going. Oh, that's great. I hopped off the stone table, clapping my hands. Come on, let's keep playing. How about some hacky sack? See who can kick it more. Eric closed his eyes, took a deep breath, as if he couldn't bear to look at me for another second. Let's go. Harry, having received his orders, nodded repeatedly and quickly wheeled him away from this troublesome spot. A grin spread across my face, and I laughed out loud, my perfect teeth telling the world just how happy I was. Unexpectedly, Eric hadn't gone far before he suddenly turned back and also smiled. But unlike my sunny smile, his face held only a sinister smirk. You, too. Come along. My wide grin instantly vanished. Got a little too carried away. Whatever. Staying in this mansion was boring anyway. Even if the hospital was depressing, at least it had more signs of life than this place. The Whites hadn't given up on Eric's treatment. The checkups were thorough, nothing overlooked. While Eric was away, the weaselly Harry sidled up to me. Thanks to young Eric's wife's cleverness, outwardly opposing Mr. Eric, but actually trying to persuade him to come for his checkup. Usually, it takes us a lot of effort to convince Mr. Eric to come. What's wrong with this guy? That's not me. I didn't. Don't try to flatter me. I patted his shoulder. You're overthinking it. I just can't stand seeing him more comfortable than me. The weasel's expression froze. My heart skipped a beat. I slowly turned around and came face to face with Eric, who was just coming out of the examination room. That sinister smile reappeared on his face. Sandy, very good. The ominous feeling in my gut intensified. Doctor. My wife is trying to conceive. Give her a full checkup too. And by the way, list all the precautions for pregnancy, what foods to avoid, make sure to write down detailed instructions. Well. So this is what he had in store for me. In that tomb-like mansion, the thing I looked forward to most each day was eating. He really knew how to hit me where it hurt. 3 hours later, after undergoing the exact same set of tests as Eric, I clutched the long list of forbidden foods from the doctor, gritting my teeth. Eric patted my shoulder, clearly in a very good mood. For our future baby, Eric's wife, you must follow the doctor's orders. Eric, you just wait. Once Harry is gone, let's see who can save you. I glared at him viciously, but I saw him raise an eyebrow slightly, a smirk playing on his lips. I was suddenly a bit dazed. This was the first time I'd really seen him smile. Have to admit, it was kind of attractive. No. Beauty is deceptive. Being handsome couldn't make up for the fact that he'd sabotaged my access to delicious food. On the ride back, we leaned against opposite sides of the car. I unilaterally started a game of whoever speaks first loses. Mr. Eric, young Eric's wife, we've arrived. All right, Harry lost. I got out of the car and suddenly stopped. This wasn't that tomb-like mansion. Eric noticed something was off, looked up at me, his brow furrowed, a hint of warning in his voice. Harry. The weasel opened the car door, bowing respectfully. Mr. Eric, your father is returning tonight. He hasn't met young Eric's wife yet. He paused, then added. This is Madam's wish. Eric sneered. What does their family reunion dinner have to do with us? Go back. Mr. Eric. I said, go back. Just as expected from the former head of Vast Horizons. When he said that, even I felt a shiver. But in the end, the car didn't leave. Eric, you're back. A sweet, yet gentle, female voice came through, and suddenly a warm snake seemed to coil around my arm. This must be Sandy. Look at me, I've been so busy these past few days, I didn't even have time for your wedding. Come in, Mommy will give you a welcome gift. A chill ran down my spine. The spot she touched instantly broke out in goosebumps. I looked back at Eric and mouthed to him. Mommy? His eyes held a depth I'd never seen before. Eric took a deep breath, forcibly suppressing the emotion in his eyes, and said sarcastically. What are you standing there for? Your mom is calling you in. My mouth twitched. I secretly flipped him off behind my back. The Quinn family dinner table was just as terrifying as the Smiths. I don't know what I did to deserve this. Before I got married, I couldn't even eat a meal in peace. After getting married, it was even worse. Eric's stepmother, Ms. Irene, held my hand, fussing over me. I stared blankly ahead, pulling appropriate responses from my mental script library. After this soap opera played out for a while, Eric's dad finally arrived. Darling, come sit. This is Eric's wife. You've been so busy lately, you must give the kids a generous gift. Eric's father nodded at me, a cursory greeting. The snake on my arm finally found a new target and coiled around Eric's father. Darling, Eric just saw the doctor today. I knew you'd be back, so I had him come over. I just asked the doctor. He said Eric needs to rest. About Vast Horizons, maybe it's best not to burden him for now. All these years, Henry has been learning from his older brother. He's grown up a lot and can help ease his brother's burden now. Finally. The anxiety that had been hanging over me all evening could finally subside. I knew that old bat being so attentive to me meant trouble. Turns out, it was a power grab. Eric's father nodded along. I've been handling Vast Horizons lately. I'm getting old, not as capable as I used to be. It's time for Henry to make his mark. With just a few words between them, it looked like the matter was settled. I looked at Eric. He just stared at the plate in front of him, showing no reaction, as if what they were discussing had nothing to do with him. I couldn't help but kick him under the table. Dude, they're stealing your company. Why aren't you saying anything? So, you only know how to bully me, huh? Then tomorrow, Henry will come with me to Vast Horizons. Seeing things about to be decided just like that, I couldn't sit still any longer. Wait. I don't agree. Everyone at the table looked at me, including the weasel Harry standing nearby. Everyone's eyes clearly screamed the same question. Who do you think you are? Fortunately, they were all civilized people. No one would say it out loud. Unfortunately for them, I wasn't. Eric is paralyzed, not dead. His legs don't work, but his brain is perfectly fine. Why can't he continue to manage Vast Horizons? Perhaps shocked by my bluntness, no one spoke for a long moment. You see, in the whites, the word paralyzed was strictly forbidden. No one dared mention it in front of Eric. After a long pause, Irene finally forced an awkward laugh. This child, what nonsense is she talking? Isn't it because Eric's health is poor and he needs to rest? He doesn't need to. I didn't wait for Irene to finish, cutting her off directly. Father, Mother, Eric has already lost his legs. Are you going to take away his career too? Who says someone disabled can't achieve great things? Look at FDR, or countless other inspiring figures who, with the support of family and friends, overcame physical adversity to achieve extraordinary success. As Eric's closest family, don't you believe he can overcome the trauma of losing his legs? This speech was so powerful it stunned Irene. Her mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. Younger minds work faster. Henry, seeing his mom losing the battle, quickly stepped in. Sister-in-law has a point. Of course, we support my brother. But Vast Horizons is indeed demanding and tiring. We're just worried about his health. How about this? Let's let my brother decide for himself whether he wants to step down from Vast Horizons. Irene nodded repeatedly after hearing this. Yes, yes. Let Eric decide. I frowned. From the way they were talking, it seemed like they were sure Eric wouldn't agree to stay. Then again, seeing him holed up in his room every day like a gloomy ghost, he didn't exactly look like he was up to managing a company. Everyone's gaze focused on Eric. He continued to stare at his plate, fiddling with his knife. In the silence, I was the first to crack. We're husband and wife, what I say goes for him too. He won't step down. He'll continue to manage Vast Horizons. Irene still wouldn't give up. Eric. The dinner knife Eric was toying with suddenly stabbed into the plate in front of him. The plate shattered, and Irene's unfinished words were choked back. We're going home. He looked at Irene, his gaze indifferent. I knew he was talking to me. In the study, I was bored out of my mind, counting stars, and yawning for the 26th time that night. After we got back from the Whites' main house, Eric brought me to the study but didn't say a word, just left me hanging while he looked through some documents. I was starting to regret it. I'd started a fight before I even got to eat, and now I was starving and sleepy. My stomach rumbled in protest, and Eric's attention finally turned to me. He put down the papers in his hand, his tone cool. Sandy, don't do unnecessary things. The Quinn family isn't as simple as you think. And don't fight for me. I don't need it. I was hungry and irritable, and his words just fueled my anger. I've noticed that you seem to have a bit of an overinflated sense of self-importance. You, and that weasel Harry too. Who said I was fighting for you? I looked at the security bars on the window. Ugly iron strips crawled across the glass, dividing the starry sky into pieces like a chocolate bar. So ugly. I'm definitely taking it down tomorrow. What were you thinking when you lost your legs? You must have felt it was so unfair. Maybe you even wished you died in that accident, rather than live like this. Eric suddenly looked at me, his eyes bloodshot. Sometimes I also think living is pretty pointless. Why can people like Simon live every day without guilt, whining and dining, while I have to face the cold stares of everyone in the Smiths? It's so unfair. But I have to live, Eric. I promised someone I would live well. I can't just barely survive, crying and complaining every day. I want to live a vibrant, beautiful, happy life, so everyone can see me enjoying being alive. So don't flatter yourself. I wasn't fighting for you at all. I was fighting for myself. I've been fighting since I was little. From the moment I stepped into the house, I never stopped fighting. But I have to fight. I insist on fighting. I'm Simon's daughter. The privileged life he owes me, I won't miss out on a single thing. Everything I have must be the same as Jessica's, or Simon won't have a moment's peace. Marrying you meant I was destined to step into the murky waters of the Whites. No matter what happens with you, I will definitely fight. The draft in the study was too strong, my eyes started to sting. The next day, a stranger came to the mansion. A poker-faced man in a sharp suit. He paused when he saw me, then bowed and called me Madam. Eric came out from behind me. This is Will Lane, my secretary at Vast Horizons. That was his only explanation before he took Will into the study. I glanced outside. The sun was shining, I felt a little happy. Half an hour later, I took a chainsaw out to the terrace. The mansion's windows were sparkling clean. Will Lane stood beside Eric, slightly bowed, saying something. Eric saw me first, his handsome brow furrowing. I grinned at him, showing all my pearly whites. Then I turned on the chainsaw. Eric wheeled himself over, asking irritably. What are you up to now? The security bars are too ugly. They're blocking my view. I'm going to saw them off. Eric rubbed his temples and said to a shocked Will Lane behind him. She's causing a scene here. Let's talk outside. A few days later, Harry came over with a crew and removed all the security mesh from the mansion. He said it was Eric's idea. Mr. Eric also said to have 2 people stay at the mansion for daily needs, and young Eric's wife can choose them. I raised an eyebrow. Not bad. This partner of mine was catching on. After that day, Lane came over every day, and he and Eric would talk for hours. I idly renovated the house, planted flowers and herbs, and asked Harry for staff. This empty, ghostly mansion finally, through my tireless efforts, started to feel more like a livable home. Eric was busy for a long time. Then, one day, Lane stopped coming to the mansion. He must finally be on vacation. That evening, I changed into a lace nightgown. When Eric came in, his eyes darkened for a moment, then quickly turned suspicious. What are you planning? I grinned like a bandit chief who just snagged a bride. Eric, we're married. He'd just been bathed by the caregiver. His hair lay smooth, masking the usual harshness in his brow, and the steam had flushed his face slightly red. His Adam's apple bobbed. Sandy, don't mess around. I leaned in, lifted him onto the bed, and kissed the corner of his lips. I insist on messing around. Not only will I mess around, I'm going to do naughty things. I need to get pregnant soon and secure my position as Eric's wife. Eric suddenly turned his head away, looking a bit displeased. I'm already back at vast horizons. You don't need a child to secure your position. Well, I still want one. I want a chubby little baby. I want a happy, warm home. Eric suddenly looked at me, his eyes reflecting the soft lamplight. With me? His voice was too soft, I didn't hear clearly. My eyes were filled with the sight of his smooth, flushed chest. Emicham, emicham, emicham. I hummed in agreement and kissed his lips again. Irene showed up later than I expected. That day, I'd taken Eric's card and spent a fortune on clothes. After I got in the car, the driver didn't take me home but to a tea house. Maybe she'd been around the whites too long, she started acting like Eric, silently rinsing the tea set over and over in front of me. I was getting sleepy watching her, so I yawned. She finally found her opening to attack. Someone from a minor family, just no manners. There are so many third-rate families in Greenville. Even your sister was more suitable for the whites than you. Do you know why I chose you to marry Eric? Well, now. I was just wondering which damn person had arranged my life, and the culprit herself just waltzes right out. Irene was still going. Because Eric is already a cripple. His status in the whites can only match an illegitimate daughter from a third-rate family like yours. Only Henry is destined to marry into a prominent family. So, know your place. There are always people in this world whose ambitions are higher than the sky, but whose fates are as thin as paper. I suddenly laughed. Irene, don't you do any market research before you make a deal? She faltered for a moment, clearly not expecting such a response. Go ask around the Smiths. Since I entered their house, how many peaceful days have they had? When I was in school, Jessica got a new school bag. I went to Simon's study and smashed 3 sets of his antique plates to get an identical new school bag. Jessica went to a prestigious high school. I went to Simon's company and caused such a scene that almost his entire company knew how badly he treated his illegitimate daughter, and I got the last spot in that prestigious high school. Irene, compared to the whites and you, I have nothing, so I have nothing to fear. And unfortunately for you, the thing I'm best at is making other people uncomfortable. I can deeply attest to that. Eric's voice suddenly came from behind me. I turned around. Lane was wheeling him in. His eyes were filled with suppressed anger. Inviting my wife over without even asking me? That's not very appropriate, is it, mother? He heavily emphasized the word mother. Irene chuckled lightly. I just invited Sandy for tea. Look at you, child, why so nervous? She wasn't inviting me for tea. I darted to Eric's side, tattling. She just told me to know my place. She also said you're a cripple, only fit to marry an illegitimate daughter from a third-rate family like me, and that Henry is the one who will marry a socialite from a prominent family, that he's the White's true heir. Irene became furious and embarrassed. What nonsense are you spouting? It's bad enough you come from a lowly background, but to spread rumors and stir up trouble. Such poor upbringing. I took out my phone and waved it at Eric. I'm not lying. I recorded it. Listen if you don't believe me. Enough. Irene slammed the table and stood up, hastily cutting me off. Eric, take your wife home. She's truly unpresentable. Eric sneered, retorting sarcastically. The one who's truly unpresentable is someone else. On the car ride back, I kept mulling over Eric's last words and poked his arm. Hey, do you have some dirt on her? He glanced at me without answering directly. Did you really record it? No, I was bluffing. I was bluffing too. I narrowed my eyes and poked his leg. Eric, you're learning bad habits. But he dropped the joking tone and said seriously. Since you mentioned the recording today, Irene won't let you off easily. I've already changed the driver. Take more people with you when you go out these next few days. Okay. I readily agreed. After a moment, he added. Remember to let me know your location whenever you go out. I raised an eyebrow slightly. Are you asking me to report to you? The car's interior light was dim. Maybe it was my imagination, but I thought I saw Eric's ears turn slightly red. I'm worried about your safety. Don't worry. The wicked live long. I've got a long life ahead of me. Turns out, some things are best not said too soon. Irene had lost it. She'd tied me up and was waving a knife wildly in front of me. That cripple Eric. What right does he have to inherit the Whites? Henry is Quinn blood. He's the only true heir to the Whites. A chill ran through me. Eric wasn't bluffing her, Eric was bluffing me. He must have proof of who Henry's real father was. I sighed. Every grievance has its source, every debt its debtor. If you hate Eric, go after him. He's a cripple, can't even run. Wouldn't he be much easier to tie up than me? Shut up. Irene let out a sharp shriek, the blade pressing against my neck. Ever since the car accident, Eric's father has been watching his son like a hawk. I haven't had any chance. But I still have you. Ha 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 ha, having a bitch like you die with me, I'm not losing out. Eric. I want you to spend the rest of your life in regret. I'm right here. Why don't you come straight for me? Hearing that familiar voice, I finally breathed a sigh of relief. Thank goodness, Eric still had some conscience. He hadn't sacrificed my life for his position as heir. The moment she saw Eric, Irene became even more unhinged. Get away. She swung the sharp blade, slashing a bloody line across my cheek. Irene. Eric sounded anxious. Father doesn't know about your affairs yet. I can also choose not to pursue the car accident. You let Sandy go, and I promise, Henry will still be a young master of the Whites. You think I'd believe you? Irene pointed the tip of the knife at Eric. You should have died in that car accident. If you had died, Henry would be the sole heir. You living changed everything. My son and I have to live at your mercy. Ha ha ha, but you came today. Wonderful. Today I'll die, you'll die, she'll die, we'll all die here together. Only Henry will live, ha 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 ha. Bang. While Irene was raving, I lurched up and slammed my head into her chin. The pampered rich lady had never experienced such a violent blow and instantly collapsed. I quickly hooked the dagger with my foot, freed myself, and gave Irene a vicious kick for good measure. I told you, do your market research before doing business. I've studied martial arts for 8 years. Even Simon doesn't dare mess with me. Yes, you're the toughest. Eric came to my side, helped me pull off the ropes, and gently touched my cut cheek, his eyes filled with pain and concern. Good thing it's not a serious wound. You go first. My people will be here to clean up soon. I didn't argue, just nodded and said okay. Irene lay on the ground, still raving. Can't escape, no one can escape. Don't listen to her, she's gone mad. Eric pushed me. Go, quickly. A sudden unease crept into my heart, but I didn't dwell on it and turned to leave the basement. Passing through several obstacles, I reached the hallway, and a strong smell of gasoline hit me. Something's wrong. I suddenly realized. Eric was never without his people. They would never have let him come in alone. He came alone. At the end of the hallway was a bright exit, with flames blazing fiercely. It was only a few hundred meters, but my legs felt like they were filled with lead. I couldn't take a single step. A voice kept echoing in my mind. Sandy, you have to live well. Yes, I have to live. I took a step forward. Damn it. Eric, you win. Irene lay on the ground screaming, like a flayed witch. Burn. Burn. Burn it all down. Burn it all down. When Eric saw me, he was so agitated he almost fell out of his wheelchair. Why did you come back? Go, quickly. And leave you here to burn to a crisp? I hoisted Eric onto my back, tore some strips of cloth from my clothes, and quickly secured him. A cripple trying to be a hero. Eric gritted his teeth behind me. Sandy, the toughest thing about you is your mouth. The thick smoke from outside had already spread to the basement. I handed Eric a piece of cloth. Talk less. There's no water here. Cover your mouth and nose, and hold your breath as much as possible. What about you? I'm tough. The wicked live long. People have to pay the price for their boasts. As I fell to the ground, I heard Eric's cries. Sandy, you said you wanted to live beautifully. Get up. Sandy, don't scare me. Sandy, please. Don't scare me. In a daze, half awake, half dreaming, I seemed to be back in the hospital. A white room, the strong smell of disinfectant. My mother lay in bed, her face pale, handing me over to Simon. Sandy, promise Mom, you have to live well. Live well, just like when I loved you and cherished you. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm going to break my promise. I never thought my life would end like this. Mom, I miss you so much. Don't scold me when you see me. After all, Eric is so handsome, and he was pretty good to me. Falling in love with him. It's only natural. Hospital ceilings all look the same, don't they? When I opened my eyes, I thought I really saw my mom. But there was a man by my bedside. Not Eric. It was Eric's father. You saved Eric. The Quinn family is very grateful to you. Irene is dead. Henry planned Eric's car accident and is under investigation. Eric's legs. There's a high chance of recovery. He will inherit the Whites in the future. The heir to the Whites will not be married to an illegitimate daughter. Along with his words came a black card and divorce papers. The Whites wanted to buy my silence. This sum wouldn't be small. I looked at the empty room. The weather outside was beautiful. Sunshine bathed the earth, and cotton candy clouds drifted slowly with the wind. Eric, I'm tired. This time, I don't want to fight anymore. I took Eric's father's card and signed the papers. Before I had fully recovered, I checked out of the hospital. I didn't go back to the Smiths. I didn't contact anyone. I went to a small town called Cherry Creek and bought a little house with a yard. Planting flowers, growing herbs. Apart from not having so many people around, it was pretty similar to my life in the mansion. Thinking back on my time in Greenville, it felt like a lifetime ago. One day, I unintentionally came across news about Eric. Tycoon's rising heir and late-night rendezvous with Smith family socialite, marriage alliance imminent. Even though it was pixelated, I recognized her. It was Jessica. I thought I wouldn't be fazed by anything from Greenville anymore. But my heart still felt a strange pang. Why did it have to be her? My house was broken into. The makeshift lock I'd rigged on the main door had been tampered with. I had just come back from grocery shopping. I grabbed the baseball bat from behind the door and slowly walked inside. Sandy, it's me. Eric's voice was very soft, as if he was afraid of startling me. I stopped but didn't want to turn around. I heard the sound of a wheelchair. He hugged me from behind. Sandy. He seemed to have so much to say, but in the end, he just held me and cried. I pushed him away. Aren't you already with Jessica? Damn it. What am I saying? Who he's with is none of my business. This isn't cool at all. I didn't want to hear his answer. I just wanted the ground to swallow me up. I hurried into the house. Eric grabbed my arm. Sandy, don't be angry. I went to see your sister to find you. I had no other way. It felt like something stung my heart. I turned around and saw Eric, looking lost and helpless, his eyes red from crying. The wind was a bit strong, and it made my eyes water. I didn't want him to see, so I turned my head away, only to see Jessica leaning against my doorway, a faint, unreadable smile on her face. All my tears instantly receded. I practically jumped up and down on the spot. What are you doing here? She chuckled softly and stepped into my yard. I yelled. Get out. Get out of my house. She strolled leisurely up to me. Mom said that a few years ago, while tidying the study, she found Aunt Linda's last letter to Father. It said that if she hadn't gotten sick, she would have brought you to Cherry Creek, bought a small house with a yard, and lived out her life peacefully here. When Eric came to find me, that's when I knew you were missing. I figured you must have come here. The day the Whites came looking for a bride to change his luck, you could have pointed to me. After you left, Lily often asked for her sister Sandy. Sandy, come home and visit. Lily misses you a lot. I miss you too. Ugh. These people are really so annoying. Eric gave me a lavish wedding to make up for everything. Sandy likes shiny things. Get the biggest ones, hang them in the most obvious places. He personally handled every detail of the wedding, but he asked for my input on all the arrangements. I found him annoying and just gave him vague, impatient answers. Lily Shaw was our flower girl. Mrs. Shaw and Jessica attended as the bride's family. Simon didn't get an invitation but still shamelessly tagged along. No one paid him any attention. Eric's legs had recovered a lot, he could even walk for short periods. At the wedding, he walked me down a long, flower-strewn aisle. Instead of exchanging rings, he placed a crown on my head. I want my beloved to live forever freely and passionately. I will always be her strongest shield. I wrote these words in a letter and sent them to a heaven that receives no mail. Mom, I'm living well. Epilogue. 3 years later, in the hospital, I was anxiously waiting for the doctor's results. Eric coughed twice beside me. You're so anxious, anyone would think I was the one about to give birth. I frowned and gritted my teeth. You wish you could. The doctor finally came out, glancing hesitantly at Eric. I didn't wait for them to coordinate their stories, I snatched the report. The word vasectomy, in bold letters, stung my eyes. I was so furious I laughed, then fanned Eric's face twice with the report. Eric, care to explain? Eric looked back at Will Lane. The poker-faced secretary raised his hands in surrender to me. Madam, the president made me do it. Eric, looking helpless, started playing pitiful. Sandy, don't be mad. I was just too scared. I sneered. Oh, keep acting. Go on. After sleeping with you for 3 years, you think I don't know your tricks? But his tone then became genuinely downcast. I was afraid if you had a baby, you wouldn't want me anymore. And I was also afraid. He took my hand. Sandy, I keep dreaming about what happened 3 years ago. I dream that I'm holding you, crying out, but you won't wake up. You grow colder and colder in my arms. I always wake up terrified, and only calm down when I see you beside me. The risks of childbirth are too great. Sandy, I'm really scared. I can't lose you again. Damn him. Whether he was acting or not, Eric knew perfectly well that this was my weakness. I stroked his head. Don't be afraid. Maybe. I'm different from before. So many people love me now. It'll be okay. I hated Sandy. When Dad brought her home, she was all thorns. The way she looked at Mom and me was definitely not friendly. After she came, Mom started crying day and night. Sandy was really insufferable. Mom bought me a new school bag. She saw it and insisted on having an identical one. Mom got angry, slapped her, and said beggars can't be choosers. I was so scared I just stood there, frozen. Mom had never hit me, never been so angry. Sandy didn't cry. She stood straight, her head held high, and spoke to Mom. Consider this slap me paying you back. If you hit me again, I'll remember it. I won't ask you for the school bag anymore, but Simon will buy me one. No words could describe my shock at that moment. She was only 12, yet she could talk to an adult like that. Sandy will never know how much that sentence affected me. From that moment, I realized adults were just kids who had lived a few more years. Besides making money, they weren't much better than us in other ways. Sandy meant what she said. From then on, whatever I had, she had to have too. But she never bothered Mom or me, only Dad. Later, Lily was born. A tiny little sister, so soft. I wanted to give her all the cutest things in the world. On the day of Lily's 1-month celebration, Sandy was lurking furtively by the door, doing who knows what. I was afraid she might try to harm Lily, so I called out to her. She jumped and hid her hands behind her back. I vaguely saw what looked like a knitted doll. Later, that doll appeared in Lily's pile of 1-month gifts. Mom picked it out strangely and asked who sent it, adding it was rather peculiar. I smiled a little and said I didn't know, but it was the thought that counted, so let Lily play with it. That ugly doll, Lily loved it. It stayed with her for many years. Sandy also stayed with her for many years. She would always secretly take Lily out to play on weekends. She thought I didn't know, but I was actually the one covering for her with Mom. The day Sandy was sent off to be that good luck bride, Mom sat in her room in a daze for a long time. Jessica, I so regret slapping her back then. Such a little child, what could she have understood? After that, whenever I bought something for you, I mostly remembered to get one for her too, and had your father give it to her. But in the end, that slap still landed on her. I'm a bad person. I didn't want her to marry into the Whites, but Jessica, if she hadn't, it would have been you. Jessica, I'm a bad person. Mom is a bad person. When Eric found me, I never expected it. I was so anxious I wanted to cry. Maybe, after all these years, I had actually started to see her as family too. The day she returned to the Shaw house, Mom hadn't been that happy in years. She kept asking me if she looked good that day. Mom apologized to her, gave her the dowry she deserved, and carefully asked her. I know I haven't been good to you all these years, and I don't have the right. But you're getting married, after all. If you don't mind, could you possibly? Mom. Sandy didn't hesitate at all. I almost couldn't hold back my tears. I covered my mouth and coughed lightly. Sandy looked at me with an expression of disgust. Don't even dream about it. I'll never call you sis. Okay, little sister.